Mind Body Life show hosted by Frederick Enteman on Global Voice Radio on Fridays at 10 a.m. Eastern. During his show, Mind Body Life founder and best-selling author Frederick Enteman investigates the little-known insights and daily methods used to create explosive life transformations and transitions with those that have risen from struggle and ascended to greatness. Here is your Mind Body Life host, Frederick Enteman.
Welcome to the Mind Body Life show. I'm your host, Frederick Enteman. This is episode 26. I'm a former professional athlete, a best-selling author of Surviving Sports, the Game of Life, a coach and consultant, and I help professional athletes create lasting success outside of sports and win the game of life. I want to welcome you to episode 26, and I'm going to discuss what exactly is the secret formula of a so-called champion. You know, there's things that distinguish great athletes, successful CEOs, entrepreneurs, just successful people in general, and everyone wants to always know what the secret formula is from others, of course. And I think most of the sports world thinks it really comes down to talent, but I will actually argue from what I've seen and coaching thousands of athletes and people, it's their mindset. There's a lot of things that actually distinguish great athletes, champions namely, from others. And again, most of the sports world really thinks it's their talent. But I have to say, when all is said and done, I want to stress it's their mindset. And this idea actually is brought to life by the story of Billy Beane. And this is it's really told so well by Michael Lewis in the book Moneyball. And when Beane was in high school, he was in fact a huge talent and actually what they call a natural, quote unquote, natural. He was the star of the basketball team, the football team, and the baseball team, and he was all of these things without really much effort. So it goes. And people thought he was the new Babe Ruth. However, as soon as anything went wrong, Beane lost it. Emotionally, he just self-destruct. He didn't know how to learn from his mistakes, nor did he know how to practice to improve. And a lot of people ask, why? And this is an example, a very famous example, because naturals shouldn't make mistakes or need practice. So when Beane moved up to baseball's major leagues, things got progressively worse. Every at-bat was a do-or-die situation, and with every out, he fell apart yet again. If you're a natural, you believe that you shouldn't have deficiencies, so you can't face them and coach or practice them away. And Beane's contempt for learning and his inability to function in the face of setbacks really puts the question out there, where did this come from? And especially with avid practice and the right coaching, he could have been one of the all-time greats. So why didn't he seek that? And I guess more or less, I want to show you how his behavior comes right out of his mindset. Mindsets have become quite popular just in the past 20 years. Someone who comes to mind is Dr. Dweck out of Stanford University. She's probably done the most incredible work, I think, all in all, on just the topic, specifically mindset. And my particular work, I've really seen it all, but I'd have to agree, it comes down to just a couple mindsets about ability, all in all, that people may hold. Some do hold a fixed mindset, which don't see abilities as fixed traits. And then in this view, talents are gifts. You either have them or you don't. Other people, by contrast, hold a growth mindset of ability. And they believe that people can cultivate their abilities. In other words, they view talents as potentialities that can be developed through practice. It's not that people holding this mindset deny differences among people either. So they don't deny that some people may be better or faster than others at acquiring certain skills. But what they focus on is the idea that everyone can get better over time. Just these mindsets alone and their lessons are highly applicable to the world of sports and in life in general. But before I delve into that a little bit, and before I delve a little more deeply into kind of the psychology of mindsets, there's actually a lot of questions that are frequently asked about mindsets that come my way all the time. Like, do people hold the same mindsets with respect to different traits? For one, that's a really good question. I'd have to say not necessarily, because people can hold one mindset about intelligence, for example, and another about sports ability. But whatever mindset they hold about athletic ability will guide their choices and their motivation in sports. Another good question is, are people's mindsets related to their level of ability in the area? And I'd have to say no, at least not at first, because people with all levels of ability can hold either mindset, really. But over time, those with the growth mindset appear to really gain an advantage, especially from athletes I've coached and seen. They truly believe that their potential is due in part to how much they work at it, and therefore their potential is unlimited. Are mindsets fixed, or can they be changed? All in all, mindsets are fairly stable beliefs, but they are beliefs. I want to stress that. And beliefs can always be deconstructed and reconstructed and at the end of the day changed. Later on, I'm going to discuss the kind of interventions that really altered students' mindsets and had a real effect on their motivation and performance. A little background on me. For a brief moment in time, I was an educator as well. So I've done some studies through education on academic performance as well, because mindsets and goals are really correlated. And through the research I've done, I've found that people's mindsets set up completely different motivations. Going back to Dweck's research, the fixed mindset, in which you have only a certain amount of a valued talent or ability, leads people to want to look good at all times. So you need to prove that you're talented and not do anything to contradict that impression. So people in a fixed mindset try to highlight their proficiencies and actually hide their deficiencies. And in fact, I found that they'll often reject valuable learning opportunities if these opportunities hold the risk of unmasking their shortcomings. Doesn't everyone have shortcomings? Isn't that actually what learning is for, right? To overcome them. I think, of course that's the answer. But unfortunately, there's a lot of individuals with the wrong, or false sense of belief. However, this type of mindset does not give people the leeway to expose and remedy their weaknesses, because any weakness can indicate a permanent lack of ability. By contrast, the growth mindset, in which you can develop your ability, really leads people to want to just do that. And it leads them to put a premium on learning. Now, this difference is starkly demonstrated in in a particular study where there were students at the University of Hong Kong recruited, which is quite, if you're not familiar with worldwide universities, this is one of China's elite. So this is where the classes and the textbooks and term papers and exams are all in English, but not all incoming students are proficient in English, okay? And surely these students would be eager to improve their English skills. I think that goes without saying. But to find out, they were told that the faculty of the school was thinking of offering a remedial English course and asked these elite students, these high-functioning students, how likely they were to take it if it were offered. So through this study, it really revealed students with a growth mindset about intelligence were really eager for this course. It could help them master the very skills they needed, right? But however, students with a fixed mindset were not enthusiastic at all because they didn't want to expose their deficiencies. And they were willing to put their whole college career, therefore, in jeopardy. And then in another study that I've read about through education, I've read about students in a fixed mindset actually lie about their deficiencies. Students perform some very challenging sets of problems or something, and then they were asked to write about their experiences to other students in another school. And the students, they would never even meet. There was a place on the sheet of paper where they were asked to report their scores, and almost 40% of the students in the fixed mindset, perhaps feeling that their poor scores were a reflection of their permanent ability, lied about their scores. And only 13% of those in the growth mindset saw fit to falsify their performance. So like going back to Billy Beane, those in the fixed mindset didn't think they should make mistakes. And there's also been studies on the brain to examine the impact of mindsets on people's attention to ability relevant information or to learning relevant information. And here in this study from Stanford University, college students came to a lab where an electrode cap was placed on their heads and recordings were made from the parts of the brain that reflected attentional processes as they performed a really highly difficult task. And each time they answered a question on the task, they were told whether their answer was correct or incorrect. And then a little later, they were told the correct answer, actually. So what did they pay attention to? This study was really revealing the students who held a fixed mindset, again, about intelligence, paid attention only to whether their answer was right. And once they knew this, they had little further interest in learning what the right answer was. So their interest in being right took strong precedence over their interest in learning. And it also later showed that this significantly hurt their overall or subsequent performance. Then students who held a growth mindset about intelligence paid really close attention to the both kinds of information they were receiving. They paid attention to whether their answer was right or wrong, and they paid attention to what the right answer was. So as a result, they did substantially better than students with the fixed mindset on a later test. It's really clear that both things, wanting to do well and wanting to learn, are important in a sports setting. It's also important to validate your abilities through high quality performance in a competitive setting. And it's also important to grow your skills over time. That is very clear to me. The problem with a fixed mindset is twofold, okay? One is that any lapse in performance is more or less a threat to the individual sense of their underlying ability and hence their sense of their future. And the second is that this great concern with ability tends to drive out learning, and often when they're actually most needed. It's hard to see how people can thrive in a world of sports if they don't have strong desire to address their weaknesses and learn. There's also, when it comes to mindsets, there's correlations to effort. And as we've seen, people in a fixed mindset feel measured by setbacks and mistakes. And they also feel measured by the very fact of even exerting effort. And they believe, like Billy Beane, that if you have true ability, you shouldn't need a lot of effort. Yet there really is no important endeavor in life, certainly not in the sports world, that can be accomplished and maintained without intense and sustained effort. That is more or less what I've seen and what I've experienced, even becoming a professional athlete. I went through many, many, many struggles, but it was the consistent and constant work of trying to improve and learn from the best that maintain that growth process. But however, like a Billy Beane mindset, it's a sign that you're lacking talent or ability. So this is serious because many young athletes who have a great deal of early ability can coast along for some time, outshining their peers. They may even come to equate athletic ability with the ability to outperform others without necessarily engaging in much practice or training. And I've seen this firsthand. You see the 7th or 8th grader that is head and heels above the rest of the pack, and everyone's talking about them. They think they're going to be a superstar, and the next year or two, everyone goes past them. And at some point, natural ability may not be enough, and others may begin to pass them by. Whether they can learn to put in that needed effort is critical to anyone's future success. And unfortunately, many just do not. And in contrast, people from what I've seen in the growth mindset, understand that effort is the way. It's that way that ability is brought to life and allowed to reach full fruition, or as much fruition as you can possibly get to. Far from indicating a lack of talent, they also believe that even geniuses need great effort to fulfill their promise. And people with a growth mindset not only believe in the power of effort, they hold effort as actually a value. Ian Thorpe, the great Australian swimmer, feels that as long as he's tried his best, he's been victorious. And he quotes, "For myself, losing is not coming second. It's getting out of the water and knowing you could have done better. For myself, I won every race I've ever been in." And that's just a great example. There's also, when you're dealing with mindsets, it also has a lot to do with how one copes with setbacks. And I think it will come as no surprise, really, that the mindsets lead to different ways of coping with difficulty. Because in the fixed mindset, setbacks are seen as indicating a lack of ability. This particular mindset often leaves people few good ways of reacting to setbacks. And in another study, it was found that those with a fixed mindset were more likely to say that if they did poorly on a test, even if it were in a new course and one they liked a lot, they would study less in the future and would seriously consider cheating. This is how people cope when they think setbacks mean they lack permanent ability, see? So in contrast, those students with a growth mindset said they would study more or just study differently. And they planned to take charge of the situation and work to overcome the setback. When the going gets rough, people in the growth framework, the growth mindset, not only take charge of improving their skills, they actually take charge of their motivation as well. So despite the setbacks, or even because of them, for that matter, they find ways to keep themselves committed and interested. And instead, students with a fixed framework lose interest as they lose confidence. So as the difficulty mounts, their commitment and enjoyment go down. Since all important endeavors involve setbacks sooner or later, more likely sooner and later, it is a serious liability to lose interest and enjoyment just when you need greater effort. So putting this all together, this means that a fixed mindset leads people to value looking good over learning, really to disdain and to fear effort, and to abandon effective strategies just when you need them most. And a growth mindset, on the other hand, leads people to seek challenges and learning, to value effort, and to persist effectively in the face of obstacles. Going back to Billy Beane, over time, he actually came to recognize that these growth mindset ingredients, the ability to set or see setbacks as a natural part of learning, the ability to improve through effort, and the ability to sustain enjoyment and commitment were all keys to success in the sports world. With this knowledge, as general manager of the Oakland Athletics, he led his team to several seasons of almost record-breaking wins on nearly the lowest budget in baseball. I always like to kind of debunk the naturals of the myth. A lot of people think, well, aren't there people who are true naturals, like Michael Jordan or Babe Ruth? Wasn't Babe Ruth this out-of-shape guy, who dragged his paunch to the plate and belted out his home runs? It's really over my 20 years of examining of almost any of the greats, it will reveal people who practice like fiends and hone their skills over many, many years deliberately. The story of Babe Ruth's development as a home run king is really interesting. It was Ty Cobb that argued that it was Ruth's career as a pitcher that helped him because he became undoubtedly a great hitter. No one expected the pitcher to hit well, so Babe Ruth could experiment with his big swing, as he was known to have, seeing what worked and really what didn't. And when it didn't work, nobody really cared. And after all, he was the pitcher, so over time, he learned more and more about how to control his swing just through open error. So when he became an outfielder, he was ready to hit. It's a great example. Take any so-called natural you can name, like Mia Hamm or Muhammad Ali, Jackie Joyner Kersee. And if you really look more closely and examine and do your diligent research, you can see the discipline. You can study the perseverance and then see the commitment that went into their success, actually. Sure, they had talent. They were born a little different than most, but they also had the right mindset. The mindsets and confidence kind of go hand in hand. And I think most think, well, isn't motivation just a matter of confidence? To some extent, yes. But to me, one of the most fascinating findings, I think, is a fact that within the growth mindset or framework, with its focus on growth, it's far easier to sustain your confidence. And in the fixed framework, with its focus on proving your ability, a poor performance casts doubt on your deep-seated ability and can undermine your confidence. Someone else's good performance can undermine your confidence. Even needing effort and practice can undermine your confidence. So it's a constant battle to stay confident in the face of inevitable challenge. And on the other side, in the growth framework, making mistakes or even having clear deficits doesn't mean you aren't or won't be good at something. It's simply an occasion for learning, for an experience, for growth, for expansion. You don't need a wagon load of confidence, more or less, to embark on learning. You just need to believe in improvement over time. Some years ago, I came across a competitive triathlete who came across my work and asked for tips with coaching. And this individual had always shared with me they always had a confidence problem. And coaches told them to believe in themselves and 100% never to doubt themselves, but they couldn't do it. And every time they posted a disappointing time or even lost a meet, they fell into self-doubt, really low self-esteem. So thinking of things in a growth framework where setbacks are just information about what you need to do in the future. So from my perspective, it's really a critical feedback. It's critical feedback which you can grow from. That allowed this individual to keep things in perspective when I reframed it. And this individual really maintained confidence thereafter in those very same situations. So I reframed it that the setbacks, or what they once viewed as setbacks, simply meant get back to work, do things a little differently. But at the end, get back to work, do your work, practice. There's an idea of potential. Many of the scouts in the sports world used to scout for naturals, people who looked like superstars, and that's, they were shaped like superstars and moved like superstars. If they didn't look the part, they weren't recruited. Yet there's a story of Ben Hogan, one of the greatest golfers of all time. And I'm here in Upper Arlington, by the way, so golf history is abundant since the greatest golfer, Jack Nicklaus, the Golden Bear, is from here in my same community. Yet Ben Hogan, he didn't have the grace of a natural golfer. Jack Nicklaus did. Muhammad Ali actually did not have the build of the natural boxer either. He didn't have a champion's fist. He didn't have that world-class reach. He didn't have the chest expansion, and he didn't really have that heavyweight heft either. Don't forget, people gave him no chance against Sonny Liston, who seemed to have it all. And I love the example of Muggsy Bogues at 5'3", 5'4", or the little quarterback Doug Flutie, 5'10" in the NFL. Seems insane. Anyone could look at these individuals and tell you they were not naturals, and by that alone, they would mean they did not have the potential to make it. To me, that's a little crazy. But within a fixed mindset, potential, you see, is really easy to judge. if you look at it that way. You just look at the person's gifts right now and project them into the future. Talented now equals talented in the future. Not talented now equals not talented in the future. So, on the other hand, within a growth framework, potential is really hard to judge. Again, sure, natural talent buys you a lot. And if you're accomplished now, you just have a leg up on others. But after you can't know where someone might end up within the years of passion and discipline and commitment and good instruction. This work, which takes mindsets directly into the world of sport, certainly provides exciting support for the view that passion and excellence in sports are guided by people's mindsets about their sports abilities. It's really interesting because from my perspective as a former professional athlete and from working with athletes, I think we're a lot of people are under the impression it's just all physical. Now we're actually to the point where we're past that, and we're studying mindsets. Where do mindsets come from? And more, we're now finding that mindsets are fostered by the kind of feedback students or athletes get from the people who evaluate them, whether it's their parents or their teachers, their coaches. And specifically, the mindsets are fostered by focus on the person. For example, a talent or ability, as opposed to focus on the process. So effort or learning. And there's a really interesting study that was found that when adults evaluate students on their abilities, even if the evaluation is positive, it puts the students into a fixed mindset. So, for example, one set of studies, they gave students some problems, teachers gave students some problems to solve from a nonverbal IQ test, and then in one condition, lauded their performance and praised them for their high intelligence. These students were found to favor a fixed mindset of intelligence compared to a group that was praised for their effort. These students, when then asked about the tasks they would like to work on next, rejected an opportunity to learn in favor of a chance to look smart again. These same students lost interest and performed poorly after the tasks became harder. These are also the students who lied about their performance when asked to report their scores to students in another school. However, students who were praised for the process they engaged in this case, their effort, these students now expressed a more growth mindset of intelligence. They overwhelmingly went for the task that would give them a chance to learn, and they also maintained their interest in their performance even after the task became harder. It would really be fascinating to look at this with coaches too. My personal favorite, the illustrious John Wooden, who coached the UCLA basketball team to 10 NCAA championships, constantly focused on his players' learning and improvement. And the fascinating thing, really, although he recognized that some players had more talent than others, he was really committed to developing each player's ability to the fullest. As an example, he actually recruited another player the same year he was recruiting the great Bill Walton. And he informed this player who played the same position as Walton that he might actually get very little playing time in actual games, but then he assured him that he would be offered a professional contract when he graduated. once you know it, true to Wooden's promise, this player not only got a pro contract, but was also named Rookie of the Year in his league. And this is just, Wooden tells countless stories about players who arrived at UCLA seeming like kind of sorry or hopeless raw material, but they blossomed into top players on his championship teams. So by focusing on process and learning, John Wooden seemed to kind of imbue his players with a belief in their own development. And it certainly, obviously, it was a belief that paid good dividends, because something like that has never been done. It kind of leads me into the question, can mindsets be changed? Can mindsets be altered? Can they be relearned? Can a growth mindset be taught? And then will people reap benefits from learning it? And there's been many studies on this, and countless studies now. What we're seeing, workshops are being developed and have actually been developed to teach a growth mindset. And it's actually in these workshops that students, like from junior high through college, depending on the study, there's many, many of them. They learn that the brain was a dynamic, kind of malleable organ, and that every time they learned something new, the brain formed a new connection. And over time, these proliferating connections would make them smarter. It's also known as, through brain studies, the 21st century, we now know the brain under the right stresses can change. This is also known as plasticity. The brain is ever changing if you give it the right stimulus. So students were also shown how this idea could be applied to their schoolwork. And interestingly enough, these interventions were relatively modest, but had rather immediate and striking effects. In every one of these studies, students who learned the growth mindset of intelligence showed really significant gains in the grades or achievement test scores. And in some studies, these gains were made relative to control groups that were also given noteworthy interventions. And then such an intervention involved training in important study skills. And in one of the studies that I've read, teachers they singled out the students who had been in the growth intervention and noted clear changes in their motivation, even though these teachers were blind to the intervention condition their students were in. It'd be fascinating to see how a growth mindset intervention works in the domain of sport, to kind of see the impact that it has on the desire to practice, the actual enjoyment of the sport, and the ability to cope effectively with setbacks, especially for those that have been turned off by the joy of sport when it actually becomes more of like a job on the next level in college. I think it'd also be fascinating to look at the impact of such intervention on elite athletes as well. Would it help, the so-called naturals to develop the attitudes and habits that would allow them to fulfill their potential instead of going the way of Billy Beane? And, to end, I think it would be fascinating to see what a growth mindset intervention actually does for teamwork. So instead of each player kind of vying to be the most talented star or, egomaniac wanting to put up all the numbers of me in the spotlight, always trying to look better than their teammates, I wonder what a growth mindset kind of intervention would do. Would it foster a more cooperative learning together environment? Certainly that would be interesting. And so, all in all, without denying the importance of that thing called talent, to be clear, I've really, in this episode, tried to show that, something else in an athlete's mindset really can be equally important. Above all, I think that's where champions or it's a make or break scenario. And I've been describing one mindset built around a belief in fixed traits that can really limit an athlete's ability to fulfill their potential. It can do this by making them value looking good. So being the star and staying in their comfort zone, overstretching themselves to learn new things. It can do this by making them feel that naturals should not have to work as hard as others to shine. And it can do this by fostering the defensive strategies, a desire to hide mistakes or make excuses, really instead of confronting their mistakes or deficiencies. I've actually known quite a few of these types of individuals, and they just stop developing and live with their excuses. It's really hard to see. Thus, that's why it really is my passion to constantly develop, coach, and hold individuals accountable so they can maintain that ground and develop consistently over time, which is proven to deliver championship results. And I also described another mindset, kind of what I incorporate into my developmental procedure when I work with my clientele, kind of built around the belief in the expandable skills that can really foster an athlete's ability to fulfill their potential by making them prize learning, by making confidence and improvement easier to maintain, and by fostering effective strategies and sustained effort in the face of difficulty. So, athletes who thought that their coaches actually believe in practice and hard work more than natural ability actually have had more success. In fact, I think all in all, I've found more and more that people in general absorb the mindset that is prevalent in their organization. So take a step back and just see what the prevailing mindset is and see what you're part of. That'd be my first recommendation. If you're actually looking to grow forward as an individual or as an athlete, you really need to take a step back and see where you are right now. Question your belief system. This all in all, this means that coaches must really themselves adopt a growth mindset, if you can't tell, which I'm favorable of, and send messages to their athletes that they believe in improvement and that they value the practices that lead to it. And then either have an expert like me on your staff, which I'm a true believer. Every program should have a mindset coach or someone to hold them accountable and keep that inner growth alive, because a coach really needs to just specialize in their sport and delegate their team. But if you are an athlete or a professional athlete that's hungry, that wants to grow, that wants accountability, please send them my way. Please share this episode with them. If you're looking to link in with me or connect, I am on LinkedIn as Frederick Intiman. I'm also on Facebook. Check out my business page if you want to contact me. I'm also on Instagram, and feel free to reach out on Twitter. It's been great. That's another episode of Mind, Body, Life. Until next time, take care.
Thank you for joining us. Listen every Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern to Frederick Intiman host Mind, Body, Life. Connect with Frederick at www.globalvoiceradio.com. Tune in next week for another edition of Mind, Body, Life on Global Voice Radio.